everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be talking about websites in the era of AI agents. I'm sure many of you have heard of the buzzword AI. You've heard of the buzzword of agents. And so we are going to be speaking about and seeing in action how all of that comes together with AI agents on websites. So I'm excited to be joined by Bill from AI 1 to Z, as well as Nej from GRM, one of our partners. They're a digital agency. And so with that, I will hand it over to Bill and then Nej to give a brief intro of themselves.
Hi, I'm Bill Rogers, CEO of AI 1 to Z. My background has been in this web content management world. I founded a company called Ectron back in 1998. It grew pretty large, and it's now part of Optimizely. After that, I spent some time in what you call conversational AI in healthcare. And when this revolution came around generative I started AI 1 to Z.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Bill and Nicole, for having me join you today. I'm Nej Jekeni. I have spent around 2 decades of my life working with organizations of various sizes across various verticals in helping them in some way along their digital transformation journeys. For the last 16 years, I've been doing that through the context of GRM. We call ourselves a digital evolution agency. We work across multiple continents and various verticals, predominantly manufacturing, membership, and generally what we refer to as complex organizations.
Great. Thanks, Nej. Thanks, Bill. A little bit about myself. My name is Nicole. I head up marketing and operations here at AI 1 to Z. Prior to AI 1 to Z, I worked at companies like Box, Google, WeWork, Matterport. So yeah, let's get started. So the way this webinar is going to run, we're going to go over some slides, but of course you all want to see it in action. So we're going to give a brief demo at the end of the slide deck. So with that, I will hand it over to Bill.
So the AI evolution is really interesting. So I actually experienced the expert systems back in my days when I was an engineer at MIT Lincoln Labs, designing digital signal processing, which some people would call expert systems. But what you see is the growth of AI was continuing year over year over year at a linear pace. And then something remarkable happened. Around 2020, something called large language models started to be developed. And why that was such a game changer is that all of a sudden, what used to require a tremendous amount of training data and all these intent models and things like that, all of a sudden completely changed. And then what was really revolutionary is when ChatGPT came to the market. And why ChatGPT was so remarkable is that it's the first time ever that the world could experience AI for themselves. And so what that led to is, next slide. So that led to that people would go to ChatGPT instead of Google. Now, Google is offering the same kind of services, and Perplexity and other services are doing the same sort of thing. And so as a brand owner, you're wondering, well, should people just go there and interact with those different sites? You have to treat it like another channel. And so that channel is a channel for people to go to. But ultimately, next slide, ultimately what you really are concerned about is when people come to your brand, how do you convert them? How do you do in fewer clicks get them to whatever your goal is, whether that's an e-commerce purchase or whether that's a signing up to register to be a membership user or whatever. So next slide. So when you think about the years that I spent in the content management, we was around 13,000 websites that were running the content management system. We were thought of as an experience management system where we were being used to personalized experiences. People were creating personas, and from those personas, they were trying to change and look at what is this user visiting of a certain persona, and from that, we were trying to personalize the experience. Reality was it was very, very, very hard. It was very hard to measure and do these sorts of things. And so, but this concept has never changed. What's amazingly that's changed that these chatbots actually can get the customer profile data information when they visit the website, and that information can personalize the experience in a way that was never ever possible in websites in the past. So we're living through pretty exciting times. Yes.
Yeah, I think that the key point to mention here is that look, personalization is nothing new. The buzzword or the concept has been around for almost 2 decades now. Most brands, businesses, organizations have always struggled with achieving any level of real personalization. And even today, very few organizations are actually managing to do it well. Now, especially in what I'd refer to as the public area of the website. So when we look at our digital real estate, we should always differentiate between the public facing and the post login sections like member and customer portals. In member and customer portals, it's relatively easy to personalize the experience from a technological perspective, but really what the predominant focus or challenge is actually getting it right in the public facing areas of our digital real estate. And in my experience, the biggest challenge that I've seen around organizations achieving this has been around data and technology. With most organizations not necessarily having the right data in the right format, in the right place, and having to do significant digital transformations in order to be able to offer any true level of personalization. If you could click on the next slide, please. So on this slide, we just ask a very basic question: what is a personalized experience in the real world? So one analogy that I often use with my clients, prospects, colleagues, we often refer to our websites as the shop window of our organization. And that's a very relevant analogy, going back to how websites came about. And the analogy that I always like to use is if you think about the experience of when you go to shopping in a supermarket or a TK Maxx in the UK. I think in the US it's a TJ Maxx. What does that experience look like? Well, essentially you have a need, you walk into a shop, you look around this vast amount of content, you find the area where what you need is likely to be. You walk around, and if you're lucky, you'll find what you need. And if you're very lucky, you'll stumble across one or two things that are also relevant to you along the way. Now, if you compare that experience with, say, going to a luxury boutique where you're met with a personal shopper or a shop assistant who already knows you, who already knows your buying history, and they say, hey, Nej, or hey, Bill, what are you looking for today? And you communicate to them what your need and objective is for that particular visit. They'll straight away go and take you to what it is that you're looking for, give you all the relevant options, and they will probably make some very relevant suggestions or recommendations along the way. That is a beautiful personalized customer experience that's going to lead to more transactions, more upsell, and so on. Essentially, what we want the interaction between the user and the digital interface to be is bi-directional, just like you would have with a conversational shop assistant. Now, how do we achieve this personalized level of this personalized experience in a digital experience? Well, essentially, it's first of all through the recognition of who the user is, where possible, and what they are trying to achieve. And we follow that by making sure that there is relevance in all the content that they see. And as much as possible, we streamline the user journey, that they have to go through to get them to that end transaction point as frictionlessly as possible. So, as Bill mentioned earlier, in the 10 years ago, we were counting clicks and saying, well, you should give a user what they want in a maximum of 3 to 4 clicks. Essentially, with AI Copilots, we're now able to make that a much more streamlined and frictionless and relevant experience. Furthermore, what really adds to that great customer experience is the recognition of a returning customer. So, if you go to any shop and you have a conversation with them and they know who you are, but the next time you come back to that shop, you essentially have to have that conversation again. That's not a good customer experience. So what we really want to try to do is also recognize a returning customer, utilize all the knowledge that we have about that customer to essentially further streamline the journey that they're going to have with our brand. Back to you, Bill.
So when you think about the past, in the past, like before AI went to sea, I was doing conversational AI with technologies like from Google Dialogflow and other types of technologies. The challenge always is that you had to create an experience that that ultimately often would fail. And the reason why it would fail is that you would drive someone down through the experience, and in the middle of that, they would change their mind. And all of a sudden, you didn't program for that. Whereas these next generation of bots, go to the next slide, Nicole. So this next generation of bots actually has history and understanding, and it knows what its goal is, and it can deal with the fact that somebody immediately said, like you're like at a hotel website and you want to sign up for a golf course to have an event there, and then what ends up happening, the person says, "Oh, what's the weather for Friday?" And so it can answer the question, but it still understands the goal to drive someone down that experience, and it doesn't get confused. Whereas in the classical chatbots, the most common phrase that people would say would be, "How do I talk to a live agent?"
Yeah, and just to add to that, Bill, from an agency's perspective, we've worked with chatbots for quite a few years now. And in our experience, and certainly based on the feedback that we get from users, they're somewhat anticlimactic and frustrating for both the end user and the people within the organization that are managing the functionality and fine-tuning the capabilities of this of the classic chatbot. Generally speaking, they are very rigid. Although they aim to be bi-directional, they're not really bi-directional. One analogy I like to use here is they're like those IVRs, those interactive voice recordings, where you have to press 1 to do this, press 3 to do that, and eventually you might get to where you need to do, but generally they lead to a lot of dead ends in a customer journey or a user journey, and they generate a lot of frustration amongst the users. They require, from a management and configuration perspective, some anticipation of why the user is there. And we assume that the user is going to use the same terminology that we will be using. And this really, even though we try to give a personalized experience, it gets their hopes up and then it disappoints them because it doesn't give a truly personal and engaging experience. It can be difficult to manage. It's very rigid, and you're kind of just forced through additional quicks without any confidence that you'll get to where you need to be. And if there isn't a predefined question that's been thought of, essentially that's most likely to be the end of your visit to that particular website or application.
I think it's important for people to understand that back in the day of these classic chatbots, the amount of work, like a thing that you needed to do was you needed to capture every type of question that people would ask. So you would actually create what they would call a knowledge or FAQ engine where you ingested thousands of pieces of content and you created intents so that depending upon how they phrased it, it would say, "Oh, they're asking this question. return back this answer, very, very rigid. And it's very time consuming. And it required an enormous amount of time from the organization to validate that, are these the answers that you want to do? Now go back to this world. So in the conversational AI world, we literally just connect to your sources of truth. So we will connect to your website. We can connect to your backend integrations like CRM systems and things like that. And literally, if you're just creating something for question and answer or answer AI, the ingestion process, you're literally up and running on that process within a day. Then that gives you the time to go over the strategy of how am I going to create workflows that's going to really eliminate, tasks that are going to people are calling our call center. And that's what makes this so brilliant is that you spend the time, you say, I got to add these other integrations because they're where the microservices of what we need to go test to go do something. Like, for example, let's say that you want to take back a product. Or you want to know the status of when the product was shipped. Having a call center answer that is very, very expensive. But these are really ideal things that these new conversational AIs can just handle very easily. You just need to expose the APIs for it to be able to talk to.
Hey,
And I think
talking
it's
about
important.
cost, sorry, just to jump in there, Bill, talking of cost savings, another relevant point came into my mind, but what else we've seen is when you're working with brands that have got content in multiple languages that are servicing multilingual audience, it becomes exponentially more expensive and difficult to manage and maintain this. Whereas with the conversational AI, essentially we get multilingual capabilities right off the bat. And we've seen that to be one of the biggest cost savers for large multinational organizations. Sorry, Nicole,
Yes,
back to you.
and just know you can adjust all your content, like Ned was just saying, in English, and then your users can ask questions, whether it's in French, Japanese, and the conversational AI or the AI agent will answer in that language. But I was also going to say that I think it's important to know that this is all possible because of the LLMs. So we often think of generative AI as ChatGPT and just asking it, becoming the new Google. But what a lot of people don't talk about is how this is possible because it's a reasoning engine. So because it's a reasoning engine, it understands what the user is asking. So then it can look at all of your content through retrieval, augmented generation, and then answer those questions. So let's keep moving on. So we like to say that brands are missing the voice of their brand. And this is where that AI agent, or call it a digital assistant or a digital concierge, a co-pilot, comes into play. And that really becomes your brand representative for talking to your users. You really want to present them with that personalized experience where it can integrate with your CRM. It can integrate with your backend systems and know what they've purchased before, for instance. As Nej was saying, when you have a conversation with somebody and you have to repeat that conversation, that's not a great experience. With these AI agents in place, it can understand what has been asked before, what have, in the retailer point of view, what have they purchased before, what events have they attended, if they were a member of an organization. And so having these digital concierges or assistants not only be able to answer your questions, but help move customers further along their journey, and we'll show you that in action, really comes into play. And this applies both on websites and mobile apps. So I truly believe that just as every company has a website, every company, every organization, every company now will have an AI agent, because you really want to create that experience in which you're interacting with those users and they're available 24/7. Represents the brand's voice. But most importantly, this last bullet here, guiding visitors from curiosity to conversion. It's not just about being there to answer their questions. It's about taking them through the steps to sign up for the events. Let's say there's forms on these digital assistants. If you're a performance arts center, for instance, then you can ask questions like, what are family-friendly performances taking place in the month of October or November? And can you help me book my tickets? That digital concierge, that AI agent will help move that user to the next step in their journey. And this is across all industries. So education, for instance, has multiple audiences on their websites. There's prospective students in this case, in this middle example is asking about, does your university offer scholarships? But then as an alumni who's coming to a site, you may want to tell them more about the events that are taking place in their city or encourage them to make a donation to their school. So every single industry has a different use case in terms of how you're talking to your users or site visitors and moving them down their customer journey. It really varies, but truly believe that AI agents will come into play across all these different verticals. And Ned, I believe you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think, categorically agree. This transcends all verticals. It doesn't matter what context you operate in. If you're online, this is something that you can't ignore. And the important thing to remember is that the actual digital user journey or user experience starts before the user even gets to your website or app. It starts when they start searching for what it is that they are looking for. I mean, some recent studies estimate that around 38% of search queries, organic search queries, are already through AI. There's different numbers there based on what study you look at, but they all suggest the same thing. The way in which users are interacting and expecting to interact with the web is rapidly changing. So brands don't really have an option in not adapting to this. The standards have increased outside of our own digital real estate. And what we can't afford to do is for those standards to drop. Ideally, we want them to enhance once they reach our branded digital real estate. I always say when it comes to technology and digital, there's no such thing as standing still. You're either moving forward or you're moving backwards. So absolutely, I think that regardless of what industry you're in, this is something that we have to address because user expectations are simply at a level where if we don't meet those user expectations, we're going to hurt our brand and we're going to use those potential customers and acquisitions.
All right, so before we see it in action, let's just go over a few items in terms of what to look for in an AI agent. Image AI is one. I'm a runner, I'm a part of a track club team. And so one question that I have when I go on my specific branded site is, can you show me the best shoes for running the 100 meters? And not only will it answer, but it will also give me images. Now, again, you can imagine the possibilities here. It could be on a travel and hospitality site or like a resort site, and you can see images of the rooms that you want to purchase, like, oh, this is ocean view versus mountain view. So image AI can go into place. Also, what to look for, calls to action. That's key because you want to convert these users. You also, in addition to adding to cart, it could be going to a specific web page where you find out more. It could be signing up for an activity, signing up for an event, for instance. So having those calls to actions are important. Also, e-commerce support, integrating with Shopify, for instance. So how do you get them to purchase immediately that product? Integrations with third-party systems. This is key, and I would say a huge differentiator in which you're really connecting to back-end systems. So every single organization has different systems that they connect to. We do provide out-of-the-box integrations. So one would be like the weather app, or it could be Google Maps, for instance. So in this case, this is like a resort example, and you're looking for directions from that resort to a specific location, you can ask that AI agent on your mobile app, for instance. Um, Connecting it to any system in which you're accessing that real-time data and bringing in that real-time data will really make that AI agent smarter, and then moving them, further along their journey, personalizing the experience when it integrates with a CRM as well, because it understands the user and their purchase history, their preferences, for instance. And then last but not least, live agent escalation. A lot of people are still not comfortable with talking to an AI chatbot. They want to talk to somebody directly. So you can request talking directly to a live agent, or if somebody is talking to an AI agent, they're asking it questions and it's just not giving them the answers that they need. That agent is smart enough to then say, oh, I need to connect you to somebody who is a live representative. And then it'll make that automatic connection so that they're talking to somebody. Now, in the past, when I say the past, I would say current day, a lot of organizations are staffing their customer support team with hundreds of people to be those live agents who are always online 24/7. You don't need that anymore with AI agents, but you still may want like a team, like a small team of some who can then be able to answer those questions if needed.
If I can
I
just
think
add
this
one point here,
Yeah.
Nicole. Every time we work with this technology, we stumble across additional benefits and use case scenarios. And I think this is a key point you've touched on. It's about escalation to AI agents and organizations that have call centers and spend vast amounts managing those call centers. One of the
Right.
things that we realize is that we can use those call recordings and transcripts of the calls that your call center receives to actually automatically train the co-pilots. So gradually,
Absolutely.
what we're able to do is essentially reduce the dependence on the human agents and increase the capabilities without making any additional investment. And that's been a huge benefit for organizations that have large call centers.
That's a key point. So just to add on to that, we can ingest all this information. So not only, connect to your CMS, but it could be what Nedge just said, all of those training materials. There's also all the marketing materials, the brochureware. So it's whatever content that you want to ingest in the system or scrape or connect to, like connecting to Box or Google Drive, for instance, as well. It's really up to the organization. And you can also say, okay, I want to connect via the CMS connector to access all the content on the website, but not the blogs, for instance. So you can exclude content as well. So we are on our last slide. I'm going to hand this over to Bill, and then we will show this in action as a demo. Oh, Bill,
So
there we go.
yeah, what you're looking at is that you have to think about things like, does your solution support streaming? Because the LLMs will answer questions and then they start giving you an answer back. You don't want to wait for it to give the entire answer. You want to let people read it as it's coming back. It just creates a more real-time kind of experience. This concept of multilingual, not only does it descend across the ability that they can ask literally in any language and it'll answer the question in any language, but then you have to think about, you also have things like form support, like you're going to collect data. Does your form engine support multilingual? The concept of call to actions, they can be buttons, but they can be full-blown calls to action. I'll show you an example of that in a demonstration where you have an HTML widget, which is the call to action, which it collects information from someone and then moves them to the right next step. So because we are a reasoning engine is different than RAG. So the reasoning engine treats RAG as a separate agent. So that separate agent has its own system prompt, it's an LLM, but the reasoning engine makes the decision on when should it call the RAG to answer a question. And so when it comes to things like comparisons, so if you want to go compare one to another, you would actually, the reasoning engine would call the answer AI agent, the RAG agent, twice to compare one product to another product, which gives you a, because most people don't have comparison information available to them. We structure data, it's not just we have CMS connectors, and CMS connectors let us bring in data. We also have scraping technology. But structured data, there's times where you want to say, I want to get an event calendar and I want to structurally capture that information. And so the ability to call integrations to go collect structured data becomes very, very important. The ability to use your voice as opposed to typing in. So we power transportation websites, and the person that's gonna go into that transportation website, they're using their phone and they're interacting through a microphone to be able to say when will a bus be available that I can go to the airport. Having out of the box web controls, you're going to see that we have a number of these out-of-the-box web controls, a search control, a bot control, a knowledge base, and others. Carousels and sliders become important because you're going to find when you're working with LLMs that you often are getting lots of information back, and that information being rendered by the LLM is too slow. But if I call a Shopify and say, give me these products, like I asked for, let's say I say I wanted to get sports jackets or winter jackets, and it comes back with 28 winter jackets with all the information. I don't want that to be going through the LLM. I want it to be visualized to the user, where the user they can interact and sort and filter, and the LLM will create all of the queries to go filter those results. But carousels become a very, very important integration. And then the concept of this next generation of integration, so REST APIs, GraphQL, but the newest integration is called MCP, Modal Context Protocol, and AI1 fully supports that. In fact, we're going to give you a demonstration using Shopify that uses the MCP protocol to be able to interact with it. So with that, I'm going to switch to a demonstration. So we're going to go share this screen. And then I'm going to move the toolbar out of the way. And so this is a demo site. And so the first thing that we're just going to do is something really, really simple. We're just going to ask a question. What is the spa like? Now, what this is a resort. The resort, hotel resort, is meant for this bot is meant for the visitors to be able to interact with the resort to get information. And so the first thing that you think about, we can just ingest the data. We have what you're seeing is what we call a welcome message. So it's always great to give some people some ideas of what they can do with the bot. So this welcome message, we have AI that actually will create this and suggest this information to you, and then you decide how you're going to change that experience. And then you start thinking about other integrations. When I click on what's the spa like, that's just a RAG call. So the reasoning engine just said, hey, person asked me this question. It looks at all of its integrations and says, we should just go to the answer AI. And you can see how fast that came back with a response. The reason why that came back as fast is that there's also caching technology, so that when we see similar types of questions come in, it doesn't have to go to the LLM to go transform the output. You'll also notice with this integration, you have a menu. You can add things to it, like they've added here, the weather. You can view your recent chats, so you can always go back and it remembers what did you interact with. You can click end conversation, and then when you open this up, it just cleaned the screen that's here. Well, let's ask another question. So we're going to just ask, what are the activities? So this is, the basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to drive somebody down an experience. Now remember, we're not programming this. There's a system prompt, and the system prompt has some examples of calls to actions. So it shows them activities. But what it did do is it did a RAG call, and it called out and found out here are all the activities. And the system prompt is saying for every activity that you see, add a learn about, because we want to learn about an activity. So when we come over here and look at this and click on learn about golf, now it's going to tell me about golf. And so it tells you about the stunning ocean views and things that you can see. But notice it's bringing the next call to action, which is to sign up for golf. Now, this is our enterprise form engine. Now, the reason why you want a form is because I got to collect a fair amount of information, and I don't want the LLM going and every time you enter something saying, okay, you could do this, but it's not efficient. And remember, every click you lose someone. So in this case here, we're just going to say, we're going to put in my information, the room number, and I'm going to click next. It's going to ask me, if I click next at this point, it has complete validation. So it knows I need an email address in here. It needs a phone number in here. And then when I click next, it's this enterprise form has Ajax. So it's going to look at a particular time and say what time slot's available. When I switch to a different date, it's now has a different set of times. And I click next. And so now it's coming up to sign up for golf and then, rent the golf cart. This is a shout out to GRM, which Club Car is a customer of theirs. But this is just showing that your forms can have images in there. So when I click sign up, I'm going to get an email, and this is where the reasoning engine is going to get a whole bunch of things. First of all, this information is stored as the form information so that you can go back and go see all the signups. But it's also sent to the LLM where the LLM analyzes it. The LLM knows in order for the sign up, I got to talk to a microservice. So it talks to the microservices to make sure that the time's still available because the person could have taken a long time before they click the sign up button and the time slot might have disappeared. So if that disappeared, it'd come back with a response and ultimately it would move the user down that experience. But I want to jump to a different demo since we don't have a huge amount of time here. So in this case, this one is the Atlas Store. And so this Atlas Store is an e-commerce experience that you can have here. But now what we're highlighting here is that we're talking to back-end services. And by the way, if I went over here and I said end the conversation and we went here, every one of these is talking to a back-end services essentially. When I say I want to see what's on the menu, that's calling a back-end service. So this is not RAG. This is the reasoning engine calling structured data. And notice that we have this card of tropical cart and then added to the cart. Because remember, the Kalani Resort is a commerce site. They're trying to get people to buy things from them. And so this bot allows them to do that. Same thing with like local restaurants. Of course, when you click on local restaurants, it's going back to another microservice to bring back the local restaurants. And obviously, it's returning back geolocation services. So it's showing this is the local one that's the closest to you, which happens to be the Kalani Resort as a resort of there. And then these are all ones that are available. But I could say something like, I want to find a restaurant that serves Italian food. And it would actually filter it down to I want a restaurant that is low price. I want something that's within 2 miles. All of those things, the LLM passes parameters off to the backend services, and it would filter that down. One of the points that I'm showing you here is that these are called cards. And those cards are generated by a technology called handlebars, style sheets, and JavaScript. And so, which sounds scary, but we have AI that actually created all of these for you. It looks at the data that comes from the backend services, and it says, here's how we create the handlebars. here's how we create the JavaScript, and here's the CSS. If I went over to the back end and said, actually, I want to make this into a slider, it would regenerate all of the information and create it as a slider. I literally can take a drawing of how I want the card layout to be, and the AI will actually create it. It means that for agencies, they get something out of the box really quick. I'm sure Ned is looking at this and saying, that's not the way I would lay this out. And his UX team would create, an awesome experience of what you're looking at. But it's a get you started kind of a mode. So let's go look at this experience here. I'm going to ask the question. I need help to purchase skis. So the person's just asking a question. I need help for purchasing skiing. And it's coming up with what I would call a call to action. And this is an HTML widget. And this HTML widget is asking people questions like, what kind of ski level? What's your experience here? What ski style? So I'll say controlled, and I like the Northeast, and I should show me a match. So it's suggesting a ski, and so it's suggesting the ski, and I click show more. That is now going to the commerce system. So it's literally going to the commerce system to actually let me purchase the ski. And this ski has different sizes, so I can pick what size I want. It only has one color. So it's letting me, basically I see the one color. But if I went over here and said, I need men's helmets. So in this case, this is calling out to an MCP interface. The AI created the cards for this. And then what it's doing is it's letting me, in this case, pick the different colors in here, the different sizes in that you might want to go pick, and I can add it to the shopping cart. Shopify has,
Bill,
go
I
ahead.
just want to throw in one important factor here. This is so we work with a lot of manufacturing brands that have very complex products with a lot of technical data that's stored in various locations in PDFs and so on. What's really important to understand is that this content does not need to exist within your CMS. We're able to essentially go and ingest knowledge from all sorts of different sources and ultimately answer questions based on that. So in those scenarios, where a bottleneck would have been a migration of that content and making that content searchable, AI allows us to kind of leapfrog across that and utilize all that knowledge, historical knowledge, without having to migrate that knowledge into the new digital real estate.
So if you went to this website, ecomai1to-z.com, and you click find the store, you would see, can I use your browser location? And then what you would see is that in AI1to-z, we have geolocation services. And so what we're doing is returning back the cards. So obviously, I live in Boston, and it returned Boston versus Arlington, Mass, which is 6 miles from here. And then you see that there's a Google Maps button. So notice like every time I did something, how fast the results, even though there's a lot of results that come back, this is where you're calling the end service and you're not putting that data through the LLM. It's actually okay. You can actually tell the LLM, here's the data, I want you to put color around it. But what's really important is that when you get those results, that it renders fast. Because if it doesn't render fast, they're going to go someplace else. But this is another integration, Google Maps. So when I click on Google Maps, it's taken my geolocation position, and it's actually going to now call Google Maps as another integration. And this is exactly the same information if I went to Google Maps. In fact, I can open up Google Maps and see the exact same information there. So you might be, look on the website, you click on how do I get there? It shows you it, and you immediately click on open these directions on Google Maps, and you have your directions. So it's basically saying, here's where I'm located on the seaport in Boston, and this is where our make-believe store is, and it gave me the Google directions to get there. I can copy these, I can email this information to someone, and so on and so forth. Um, I think I think I'm going to show you one more thing, so that to get through another kind of point, and that is, one common thing that people have with stores is that they want to return information. And so usually that means that they have to call the call center, because they usually need to have something that gets shipped with the product that's going to get returned. So when they come over here and do a return order, this is where you start looking at ultimately this is the enterprise system for forms, and I'm going to enter in the order number, select the reason. It's too large. I want an exchange. And you'll notice that as I click these things, you see how the enterprise form system will change. So I want a different size. So now it's asking me for the size. I'm going to say a 14. And then I'm going to click next. It wants my contact information. Then I'm going to click submit. And so it submitted this back to the reasoning engine. The reasoning engine created it. It has available to it what they call a templating system. So you can do templated emails, templated PDFs. And so in this case, it created a PDF. And so we created this template PDF, and these just look like mustache tags. So think about what just happened here, that this information was collected in the form. This information was collected in the form. All this information is just all part of who the organization is, their logo. From what I entered in, it created a barcode, it created a QR code. So all of that is available. So if you're in the tourism industry, somebody buys something, we can create the QR code that indicates their ticket that they just had. And with that, I'm going to open it up to questions.
Yeah, so we are a little bit over time, but there was a few questions that came to us directly. One was about the accuracy of answers. Like, how do you make sure the AI agent doesn't hallucinate or give the
Yeah.
wrong answers?
Yeah, so one of the things that happens when
And
you're
Bill,
in
you can
this kind
stop sharing.
yeah, I was going to show them
Oh,
something
okay,
real quick.
okay, got it.
So one of the things that you happens in here is that when you go to an agent, so let's just go to the Kalani Resorts, and you look at the data. You actually will see the how we answered questions in here. So you can actually like if you look here, you actually see the answer. The thing that you also get is if you see an answer that you weren't expecting, you can click Analyze. So what happens there is that all of the meta information that we use to answer that question, you can say, why did you answer this question this way? So the way you present hallucinations is that inside of the system, there's answer AI and there's the reasoning engine. And so hallucinations is going to be associated with your answer AI. It's the RAG. So what we're doing in that system is we're giving it a system prompt to give it character and describe different things that are associated with it. And then what we're doing is we're telling it only answer the questions based on the context that you're given, which is if you think what happens when you ask a question, the reasoning engine formulates the vector query and it's passed over to the answer AI to answer this question. If it doesn't get context to answer the question, it's essentially going to come back with something called an I don't know. And which is it's a good thing. It's basically only answering questions that it knows it has an answer to. Like for example, if we ask the Kalani Beach Resort, what's the capital of France? The LLM obviously knows that it's going to be Paris, but it will come back with an answer to say, what's the purpose of the Kalani Beach Resort, and not answer the question because it's not part of the context of what it needs to know.
Awesome. And then Nej, how do you see AI agents fitting into the brand's broader digital strategy and more information about GEO?
Yeah, so I think, look, AI is becoming a little bit of a buzzword, and everybody's just AI, mentioning AI as if it's almost like a single thing. I think that it doesn't really give us the context that we need to think about when we're talking about this specific technology. And the context that we're focusing on here is user experience, customer, which is a subset of overall customer experience with a brand. I always remind clients and peers that, look, AI is not the solution, strategy is the solution. What marketers need to focus on is still the same strategies that they've always focused on, how to provide a better customer experience, better engagement. But what AI and the Copilot does for us is it allows us to achieve a lot more in a much shorter time frame with much smaller investments than we could have done historically, and it allows us to leapfrog those barriers that we typically had in being able to offer any sort of personalized experience. I think it also coincides with other trends within the industry. So what we're seeing on an increasing basis is composable MarTech stacks, what we refer to as best of breed. So generally, the industry has already positioned itself to true omni-channel communications with their brands and audiences. And I think every time we incorporate a co-pilot and we have a conversation with a customer or a prospect, we're continually learning about that individual, and we're able to reciprocate that across any interface that we have with that client, including eventual human transactions that we might have as part of that process. There's a couple of other points that I think are also relevant here. So when Bill was talking about the previous answers and when you end up with an I don't know, well, that's essentially where we as an agency or a marketing team would come in and would get prompts on whenever the co-pilot was unable to answer something. And that creates a great funnel in telling us what content we need to create. And going back to the point about more and more people searching through AI, well, as we track and analyze these conversations that people are having through the co-pilot, we're actually able to repurpose these conversations and publish them as content, which actually trains external AI tools as well. So what we've noticed is a natural increase in organic traffic coming in from people asking AI for recommendations to our clients and brands. That's simply just been a byproduct of us facilitating this capability on our own site.
Awesome. And then where do you guys see 5 to 10 years from now the website? Like, what will it be in that time frame, 10 years out from now?
Yeah, so even today, everything that you do in that chatbot generates an event. And so, and which also means that we can generate events to do things. So I think you're going to see sort of a marriage of a bot and a page that it's on, that page will actually change as you're interacting with it. And I think the concept of what a bot is today and what a bot will be in the future. So people are so familiar with the bot on the bottom right-hand corner or a search bar as a bot, but there's no reason why anything in the page can't execute the bot to come up so that you can start interacting immediately because you have a concept here. So instead of seeing a little question mark with like explaining what something is in more detail, you get that explanation, but you can start having a conversation with it.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think just if we look back at something like COVID was a catalyst for people and organizations to realize that actually we don't all need to be in the same building to do a good job. I think in the same way, technology is getting to a point where the way in which people interact with websites is changing, right? Why do we need to type? Why do we need to click? Why do we need to go and navigate and visually something? So I think that the biggest change that we should expect is the way in which people interact with organizations. It's going to be a lot more dynamic, it's going to be a lot more fluid, and we're going to see a lot more bi-directional voice communications.
Awesome. So with that, we are a little bit over time, but thank you all for joining us today. I appreciate it. And we'll send this recording out as well. So yeah, have a great rest of your day, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Thank you.